The 19th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Land and Physical Infrastructure is hereby reconvened. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon.
Members are reminded to turn off their cell phones or place same on silent or vibrate. This hearing is being broadcast live on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Members of the viewing and listening audience may send comments via email at parl101@ttparliament.org, on our Facebook page at facebook.com/ttparliament, or on Twitter at ttparliament. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind our audience and our viewership that the objectives of this inquiry are to understand the current state of the ferry service in Trinidad and Tobago, to examine the policies and procedures used to acquire ferries, and to ensure that value for money is obtained, to determine whether due diligence governed the conduct of all aspects of the maintenance and management of the provision of the seabridge service, and to determine the changes and challenges with respect to the maintenance of ferries. I would like to remind our committee members to direct their questions and concerns through the chair. And as of this point, please activate your phones whenever you're recognized, and please switch off the phones whenever you're not speaking. I would now take this opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Stephen Crease. I'm chairman of this committee. And I will invite members of the committee, starting on my immediate left, to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening and welcome to everyone. Member Darrell Smith.
Good evening to everyone. My name is Wade Mark, member.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glenda Jennings Smith, member.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nigel Lefreitas, member.
Good afternoon, Lovell Francis, member.
Good afternoon, Franklin Khan, member.
Good afternoon, Rushton Parry, vice chairman.
And as I said before, my name is Stephen Crease, and I'm the chairman of the committee. I would like to ensure our first witness that these proceedings are under the jurisdiction of Parliament, and therefore you are afforded parliamentary privilege in terms of whatever statements you make. And therefore you should exercise a due amount of discretion with respect to any of the people you may have to mention during your presentation. I will now invite you to introduce yourself, sir.
Yeah, my name is Michael Annisette, President General of the Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union. And also,
do you care to make an opening statement?
Yes, I do. I do.
Please feel free to do.
Yeah. Honorable members of this investigation committee and the general public, I think it will be remiss of me if I don't debunk the malicious and at times disinformation that has been placed in the public domain as it relates to the contract for supplying catering staff, food, and other things on board the vessel. I have heard in the public domain that the Seamen's Union and Michael Annisette in particular receives $700 a month for the Galaxia. And as a result of that, he is supporting the whole question of the Galaxia. That could be further from the truth. And let me make it clear, because I make no apologies whatsoever. for what I'm going to say. The Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union was found in a situation where the government of the day had determined that they were going and retrench workers. And we had several discussions with that government in respect of the way forward. And one of the salient points that we make and we continue to make, that the union will not accept the outsourcing of any jobs that falls under our jurisdiction. And by extension, you are sending our workers home and you're bringing in private contractors to do the job. That has been a philosophy of SWWTU. But more importantly, we had several retrenchments, and as a consequence, we determined as a business model to do something new and get away from the traditional collective bargaining purposes and entered into business whereby we'll be able to generate revenues, one, and two, jobs for our members who have been displaced or who are on the labor market. And I want to make specific reference to a document here. I don't know if you all will want it into, but it's a statement that was made by Honorable Franklin Kahn, Friday, April 29, 2005, when the Honorable Minister addressed Parliament. And what I want to refer to is item 6. Mr. Speaker, marine and towage as a non-strategic business will be offered to Port and Maritime Services Limited. A 3-year management contract will be established with that company, after which the marine and towage business will be provided through a competitive bid process. The initial arrangement stemmed from a request by the SWWTU, the principal representative body for port employees. The SWWTU owns 49% of the company. This is a document that Mr. Khan read into Parliament. So then we make no apologies whatsoever for supplying labor on the ferries. The supply of labor in the maritime industry by unions are an acceptable principle in the maritime industry. We have a labor supply pool, and we supply labor not only in Trinidad, but internationally and regionally. Right, that is one. And for the public, this is a document too, an agreement for the supply of labor to Johnson & Johnson that was entered in 2007. The union again, in our concept of our trade union ought to operate, Johnson & Johnson was going to send home everybody, and they offered a private contractor to supply the labor. We were representing the workers. I had to fly out to the United States to meet with the principals, and there was a fundamental agreement. Given what you are saying, we will give the labor to your company to supply because they are your workers. And it's a fundamental principle that if you send the workers home, we as the union will stand up and fight if we're representing the workers for those workers to continue to work rather than sending them home and bringing in new employees. All right, so then I want to make that point because you see people seem to forget. I have another contract here, and I could go on and I could go on. This is with Lennox Offshore Services. We supply labor there too. I fly to Holland to get labor on the Bombax project, which was the first project of the 40-inch pipeline, lane pipeline in Trinidad and Tobago. I made representation for our offshore workers who are welders. And we were able to negotiate with the company to fly our workers out to Holland to learn the welding in order for them to be employed, because that has been our vision all along the line. But further. Some people might want to know what is our vision. Our vision is derived. I'm a student of history, forged from the love of liberty, selected speeches of Dr. Eric Williams. And I want to quote him. Page 51. P&M perspective, places great emphasis on the participation by the trade union in economic activities. Not me who said that. is the founding father of the People's National Movement, made that fundamental statement that the unions must be involved in the economic activities of a country. And he cited Israel as one of the places where that was done and where it is successful. Having said that, one will understand and appreciate the rationale and the vision and the new thinking of this organization, who suffered almost 65% emasculation by retrenchment of our members, and we set up a business unit in order to get employment for those personals. And let us deal with the ferry service. We were supplying labor originally in 2005. And the Port Authority, not the union, not Michael Annisette, determined in 2010 to go out for tender because they determined that they were losing money, it wasn't making business sense, and therefore they went out for public tender. And our union, through our company, tendered and won the tender. We submitted a prize for that tender. It was agreed, and we were awarded a contract for the supply of labor and catering services. And what is so disheartening, when it have respectable people and people who are supposed to understand what is happening, goes in the public domain and try to tell the public that we're getting $700,000 a month for labor, which they know is a fallacy, which they know is misleading. I wonder what is the purpose and to what end that responsible people who are supposed to be leaders in this society could mislead the public by making such statements. Do you know, members, and I will conclude, that the labor based on our contract, the labor supply is $222,000 per month. But do you know that our labor cost is over $400 and something thousand? Is the country aware of that? Is the country aware that we subsidize the government in the sense then that the materials that we supply on board the vessel, we are only paid 50% of the value of that, and we have to absorb the other 50% cost? Is the country aware that we employ over 150 people? Is the country aware that we pay tax? Is the country aware that we pay VAT? Is the country aware that we are a registered company? Is the country aware that the government is owing us over $7-point-something million in terms of receivable over a 90-day period? And in other words, we are financing the operations there. But no one talks about that. But our purpose will continue to be to find employment for our members through a different mechanism. And if people want to believe, well, that is wrong, so be it. But we will continue to maintain that the question of being involved in the economic activities cannot be the remit of a certain group of people only. And when the trade union movement gets into it, when we talk about people's center, then it becomes a problem because $700,000, all right, a month becomes a problem, and it's for 2 vessels. And when you work it out based on the passenger ship that we were asked to calculate it on, it works out to $3 per passenger a day. That is what it works out to, not $25,000 a day. $3 per day for the passengers. And I want to make it clear, it was a public tender. We tendered. We had a right to so do. And I'm not going to apologize to anybody for venturing into a new dynamics in which to make the union more relevant, in which to restructure our organization by going into business. Because there's a song, when labor hold the reins of power, I want to be there. And what is wrong with labor being involved in business? I thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. You've preempted my line of questioning, so I'll ask, how are you paying taxes if you are suggesting that your operating costs by your operating costs, you are recording a loss?
Well, because the law says I have to pay tax. So I have to pay tax.
On a losing business?
Hear what I'm saying. Hear what I'm saying.
I'm aware of how the taxes in
I
this country
made
work.
a specific reference to the misrepresentation, and quote me correct, where it was stated in this August body, that we get $700,000 for labor supply, which was a misrepresentation, because the contract is not for labor supply, it's for several entities that culminate in $700,000. And I'm saying that if you owe me $8-point-something million, obviously I am subsidizing myself.
So is the 700,000 figure correct?
Yes, it is. It is. It is a tendered figure that we tendered on, and let me make it plain to the general public. That figure is less than what the Port Authority had to pay out when they were involved in the operations. It is considerably less than what it cost the Port Authority to do the very said operation that we tendered for.
So if the 700,000 figure is correct,
yeah,
then your opening statement is disingenuous.
No, to who? You?
No, it belies the facts.
No, well, that is
you had an
your
opening soliloquy in which you sought to make the point that the figures being banded in the public domain were incorrect.
All right, well,
but you've just substantiated, Mr. Annisette, that the figure is correct.
No, but you see, you are missing
which
the fundamental.
obviates your opening statement.
You are missing a fundamental point. If you listen to my statement, I would have said in the public domain, there's a statement that is being made by people within this August body, which says that Annisette gets $700,000 for the Galicia vessel, not the two fast ferry vessels that we tendered for. The statement was the Galicia, which was a misrepresentation, because we do not get $700,000 for the Galicia. That is what I said. So let me correct you, and let me correct the records for the public purposes. Thank you.
That's a correction, because your opening statement did not establish that fact.
No, I disagree with you. I made it clear it was the Galicia the statement was made. You could read back the records.
There is a record which can be reread.
Okay, thank you.
I was listening to you with great intent.
I appreciate it.
Your opening statement has been obviated by your subsequent statement. So can we get it straight? Is the 700,000 figure being bandied in the public the correct figure?
No. The figure that was bandied in the public was for the Galicia. Let me make it clear. The figure of the 700,000 was bandied about for the Galaxia. And there was even a caveat that is why I am supporting the retention of the Galaxia in Trinidad and Tobago. It is in public records too. And that is not a fact.
Okay. We can't chat, and I shall leave that issue alone.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Mr. Annisette, are you familiar with a company called the Port Workers Private Sector Manning Services?
Obviously.
Good. Where do you have offices?
Where do we at SWWTU? 1D Rising Road, Port of Spain.
Okay. Are you aware that a number of your workers have qualms, have concerns with the functioning of your company?
No, well, they're, as long as you're running any company and the system that we operate, you're going to have people who will have qualms because they cannot have their own way. They cannot get their own way. And that is a normal business.
Okay. Maybe I should be more specific.
Yes.
Are you aware that you have workers who are alleging serious abuses being committed by this company?
Yeah, I am aware that it had several workers that went to Tobago with Mr. London and accused our organization of sexual favors for employment. Mr. London sent and called me. And when we were finished, he humbly, and Mr. London is still alive, he's in London. He apologized humbly and profusely to my organization and to me for taking on board some of those mischief statements, because people are going to say anything in Trinidad when they cannot have their way. And I understand that, and that is part of life, and I was warned about that. Okay. But I have a responsibility as the president of the union, and I live a particular life. There's 12 children that I have, and I have 13 grandchildren and 3 grandchildren.
My final question before I stand down. We have testimony which says that you, Mr. Annisette, have been a perpetrator of unwanted sexual advances to a number of female workers. How do you respond to that?
That was told to Mr. London too. And when the facts were cleared out, he apologized to me profusely. Because that is a norm. If you do not get work and somebody else get work, the statement is they have to be with the boss to get work. Because there are some small minds that we have involved in that. But that is part of the business, that is part of the life, and that is what this business, you understand, entails. But what I know, there's somebody up there who is greater than all of us, and he's the seer knower of everything. And I leave that in his hands, and that will never bother me because I can sleep easily every night.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Annisette, as a woman here, I think I'm the only woman on this panel. You spoke openly, and you spoke about your company pays taxes, and you pay everything. Why don't you like to pay women who have been employed with you when they applied for their maternity benefits? Because we have had reports, and I understand those reports were lodged at different places. Do you have something against women employees?
You see, again, I listened to you when you were questioning a young lady, and I was disappointed. Disappointed because I respected you, and I know that you are a mother, and I'm a father. And the question that you asked that young lady is whether or not you and Mr. Annisette had a personal relationship, which I thought had no bearing here whatsoever, but that as it may, I cannot tell you what to ask. People are free to say what they want. We have paid everybody who would have come to us, and if you have not been paid and you have not lodged a report or a complaint, I cannot address the particular matter. And I'm saying, while I have had letters coming from unions and whatnot, none of the employees has come to the organization and said, Mr. Annisette, you know we haven't been paid. As a matter of fact, let me put it on our records. There are people who can't qualify for NIS payment given the state of their health. And this organization, because of a people's organization, went ahead and set up mechanisms to ensure that these people are paid under the NIS benefit. And I could show you documents. We have paid, in terms of advanced salaries, over $300 and something thousand for workers who at some point in time would have been affected by not working or by having problems home or having to pay rent. And we pay them in advance of their working because that is the philosophy of this organization. There are several people, and the proponent who you ask the question, when their house fell down, and they went to the minister, and they couldn't get a house, they came to Seamen's Union. And Michael Annisette, the president of Seamen's Union, on behalf of that lady, made representation, and that person got a house. And it's not only that person. There are several other people. And let me put on records to her, we are in business not now. We also, and Mr. Mark was a beneficiary of that, NUG SWWTU, construction company. When we, as two unions, put our heads together under the founding father, and we agreed to build houses in Valsin, and there were certain ministers who say we would have debased the value of the house if they bring people there, workers. And we were able to build houses for $150,000 for our members, when private sector was building those same houses for over $500,000. That is our history. That is what we do. And if anybody tells you that I am against women, I have grandchildren who are women. I have daughters who are women. Why will I not want to pay somebody benefits when we would have paid people benefits who didn't even qualify for the benefits in order to ensure that these people get them paid? And I could show you pictures of people thanking us, you know, for doing what? This same company, for buying books for over 50-something children who could not afford to buy books to go to school. This company, under my leadership, took a decision and went and buy books for all those children and them. And that is our philosophy. That is our history. And nobody could deny that. And no amount of sexual harassment talk and all kinds of the base language could refute that fact and will ever change that reality.
So I have a simple question for you. Can you say yes or no whether there are persons employed by your company who have not been paid maternity benefits?
Anybody who is employed by Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union will be paid their benefits. If they haven't been paid and they didn't bring it to my attention or the organization attention, do not blame them. But as a union, as a company, a union-run company, our philosophy is to recognize every law in Trinidad and Tobago, including paying any maternity benefits.
So I'm referring here to the catering company.
Yes.
And let me conclude.
Yeah.
Are you aware that it's a matter before the labor courts relative to non-payment of maternity benefits?
I am not aware.
To your company?
What I'm aware of, I'm going to tell you what I'm aware of. We got a letter from Communication Workers Union saying that 5 workers, all right, say they wasn't paid. 5 workers. And I asked you how many people have been pregnant in the company. It is more than 5, okay? And I said, but how could you send such a threatening letter without even asking a question? And there's no grievances as far as we are concerned, because we have a philosophy that if there's a problem within the organization, because we try to build a family organization, a people's organization, if the matter has not been brought to the organization, as far as we are concerned, a grievance does not exist. That's a fundamental principle in industrial relations. And as I told the union, okay, if that is done, I am prepared to investigate it. Further to that, and I want to thank Comrade, and he is there, Comrade Roger came to me with the same question. He says, 2 ladies came to him, and I explained him what the situation was. And he said, but they never told me. He said, well, I will talk to communication, because I'll tell him, as long as there isn't an official report of non-payment to the union, all right, I will consider the matter a no matter.
Does the name Giuseppe, a person named Giuseppe, work with your company?
Giuseppe, no.
Are you sure there is not a person named Giuseppe who works with the union company as a person?
I do not know anybody by the name of Giuseppe working with the company.
Okay.
All right.
Were you ever called by somebody in that company and told about a situation relative to a young woman and advances towards her?
No, never.
Okay, good. But I want to close by putting this on the table. Yeah. But indeed, there is a matter which is lodged at the Ministry of Labor pertaining to non-payment of maternity benefit.
All I will simply tell you is that if there's a complaint that has been lodged to the SWWTU and the workers to the SWWTU, and the company and the workers has not been paid, if it's an official complaint coming from the workers, that matter will be investigated, and the persons, if they have not been paid in keeping with the law, they will be paid.
You know, sometimes, especially women, when they work at a company and the boss is the person that you have to complain to, they find different ways of bringing their complaints to the notice of authorities, where they would get some kind of redress. So I'm not making excuses for anybody, but what I want to put to you, that there is indeed a complaint at the Ministry of Labor relative to the management of that same company, that catering company.
Well, I'm simply saying, again, you see, it is convenient to talk about bosses, but when there's a need for salary loans, when there's a need to buy books for the children, when there is a need to go and talk to the minister to get houses, there isn't a fear for the boss. You come to the boss, and the boss help. You see, life is funny, but as I said, I believe in my spiritual African roots, and it has taught me something. And the truth will prevail eventually. You could run, you could hide, you could try to malign this organization or my name, but the truth will prevail. And let me repeat it again. I have grandchildren who are women. I have great-grandchildren who are women. I have children who are women. And I know, based on African tradition, that the first person in this world was a woman. And therefore, in order to get respect, we have to treat them with respect. And I will continue to believe in that philosophy, and I'll continue to practice that philosophy. And no amount of trying to malign my name will prevent this organization from going outside there and seek employment for our members internationally, regionally, and locally.
Minister Khan.
Mr. Annisette,
Yes.
let's change the conversation a little here.
Yes, Mr. Khan.
Over the period of this inquiry, we have interrogated, questioned the port's board, the port's management.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, we're looking at the efficiency of the port or the lack thereof and how we can get it right, especially the sea bridge.
Thank you.
The Seamen and Waterfront Workers is a recognized trade union.
Yeah. Yes, we
port.
are a recognized majority union.
It is obvious from the discourse that went previously and from the numbers,
Yeah.
the port is a very inefficiently run organization.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
No, I would not agree. There are some hiccups yet, and there can be some improvements, yes. But let me remind you, Honorable Minister, because you see, in 2003, I was involved. I led the negotiations. You were part of it. And we sat down and we worked out several mechanisms in terms of how to make the port productive, how to make it efficient. Don't forget that, and I will read all the documents because I work with it. Having said that, we accepted 3 retrenchments on the port to bring down the port labor force to international best practice, which was 700 people. And I will show you the document. It is here. You were part of it. I will show you Mr. Jerry Hospitales' statement on the... But what happened? We agreed to send people home. We paid the supreme price. And what happened after? Within a year or two, all right, the labor force went back up to over 1,000 and something people. Who do you blame for that? Do you blame the union? We don't employ people. We don't employ people. But having said that, we have committed ourselves, and with you too as the minister, to working with the board and the management to ensure that the port reaches the efficiencies that is required. Because I am painfully aware, as a member of the ITF and the regional representative for the Latin American Caribbean region, that if this port and the Port of Point Lisas doesn't operate in terms of international best practice, vessels would not come to Trinidad and Tobago, and we will suffer.
But you're contradicting yourself.
No,
Listen,
hold on. That is your view.
No,
with
you're
the
saying,
greatest of respect.
You're saying
that is your view.
The port is not inefficient. It was clear over the period of the inquiry, both from the discourse of the management and the board. The port is inefficiently run because all their key performance indicators are below international standard, and there's a major crisis on the sea bridge, which is really the purpose of this inquiry.
Yeah, the purpose.
So your cargo business is out of whack. Your sea bridge, which is your other main portfolio, is disastrous to say the least. There's port, board, management, and union. These are tripartite system. I am telling you that the port is inefficiently run. You are telling me no, but the figures show they're losing $400 million a year.
Yeah,
so
but
you cannot tell me the efficiently run. I am asking you as a representative body, what do you think is causing this major hemorrhage on the port, and what, in your opinion, we can do to get it right?
All right.
And we want the involvement of the union. I will deal with your company later on. Okay. There are some issues that needs to be sorted out there, but fundamental to this inquiry, we want to get the union's perspective, because the union is a key stakeholder.
All right.
And the union cannot claim that the port is efficiently run because you represent the workers.
No,
because
say
the
what I
figures show
said.
otherwise.
Say what I said. I said there are issues that needs to be sorted out.
Just answer me what you think has gone wrong.
All right, I will tell you.
How from the union's perspective, not from PWPS, from the union's perspective, as a representative trade union body, what do you think, what initiatives you would like to see the port's management, and by extension the government, take to get it a semblance of being right?
All right.
We're on the right track.
The first thing that I would like to see is that when we sit down and we agree, which we have done with all the governments, to implement a system in terms of best practices, in terms of international best practice, and we agree with the retrenchment of armed workers, and we agree to put systems in place, that those systems that we agreed to are put in place. As I speak to you, I have a document where we signed off in terms of best practice, in terms of cutting the labor force, in terms of several documents. That was coming out of the 2014 to 2017 collective bargaining period. We also told the Port Authority that we cannot continue to run the sea bridge on the basis of our onshore contract because it will hemorrhage the government and the Port Authority. We have submitted over a 12-year period collective agreements that is rooted in the maritime concept. And to date, the port has not engaged the union in any of those discussions. We are also saying, listen, we need to train our workers, all right, and certify them so that they will be properly trained in order to operate. We cannot continue in the port to have $1 million equipment and you send somebody who is not aware of the equipment to train on that equipment. We have suggested, the union, that we buy simulators like I've seen in Germany in order to train these workers. Because what happens when we do it the old way that the union have rejected is that you run into course. We are saying, listen, there's a need also for discipline within the port industry because it's a culture and it's not about the port, it's a Trinidad thing. People do not care and therefore we need to build a new kind of structure. We have given the commitment to the management of the Port Authority that we are prepared to work with them to seriously engage the management and the board in order for the port to be efficient and effective. And it hurts me. You know why? Because I have had the privilege of representing the Latin American and Caribbean region. As the vice chair of the ITF, I've traveled to international ports, and I believe that given the tools and the environment, that we can make the Port of Port of Spain a better port.
So, in conclusion, then, would you say that you think the current management of the port is well equipped and is competent and skilled enough to handle this major task ahead?
I believe that the management of the port needs a beef up in terms of the skill sets that you will require to do the kind of transformation that is necessary. And let me make one pointer. The port hired a change manager from PricewaterhouseCoopers for 12 years, and nothing changed. Who do you blame for that? The workers? Who do you blame for that? You see, people have short memories. Let me repeat it again. The port, at considerable cost, hired a change manager from the port, from PricewaterhouseCoopers for 12 years, and there wasn't even one fundamental change. The port of Port of Spain brought in a foreign company, Porsche. Don't forget that. Keep them here at considerable prices to transform the port, and nothing was done, not one thing. And I am saying that we have the indigenous skills in Trinidad and Tobago in order to make those transitions. But there has to be the will, both on management, both on the stakeholders, and both on the union, to take the necessary decisions that will take us to the pathway of productivity and efficiency in the port industry.
Yes, let me welcome Michael Annisette of the Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union. You made a point a short while ago that you cannot run a sea bridge on an onshore contract.
Yeah.
Would you like to elaborate for this committee what you meant by that?
All right. we had a government shipping service sector, okay? And the contract that was negotiated was an onshore contract. There was no provisions for a maritime contract. So that when the business of maritime started to expand and we acquired vessels, we started to manage vessels, okay, there wasn't that transition from the onshore contract that speaks to that if you work 8 hours, the next hour after is overtime. That will happen in a maritime industry. And then you get double time, triple time based on what is happening. In the maritime industry, it is governed by international rules and regulations. SWWTU 95 covers it, all right? The Labor Convention 2006 covers the terms, the conditions, and what is expected and is required. And if you do not put yourself in that space, you're going to find yourself hemorrhaging in terms of cost. Because the fast ferry operations is a 12-hour operations. It is a 12-hour operation, and then therefore you need to structure your contract to reflect what are the provisions in MLC 2006 that speaks to a maritime industry contract separated apart from our onshore contract in which the port operates presently. And let me make the point again. Allow me to make the point again. This union have submitted over the last 15 years collective agreements separated apart from the onshore agreement so that we could have a dedicated maritime collective agreement. And to date, the management or the board of the Port Authority have not responded to our proposals. So it's not that we like it. We recognize it. We have done what we're supposed to do, and the management have failed to respond on the board to our proposals for a dedicated maritime contract.
Have you ever been a member or commissioner on the Port Authority?
Yes, I have.
Are you familiar with the procurement processes?
Yes, I am.
Would you want to share with us what, in your professional opinion, as a trade unionist and as a person who has been involved in international maritime business and operations, where did we go wrong? Firstly, with the Galicia, and if you can share with us, where did we go wrong with this whole question of the acquisition of the Cabo Star and the Ocean Flower, given from a procurement perspective, given your experience?
Okay. What I can say in terms of the Galicia, Superfast Galaxia, and when I made the statement, it was bandied about that I'm getting all this money for the contract. That is why I'm supporting them, unfortunately. But the facts will be the facts. The truth will always be the truth. The Galaxia went through the normal tender procedure. The Central Tender Board of Trinidad and Tobago was involved in the procurement of that vessel. And therefore, if anybody wants to allude to corruption, well, I guess the Central Tender Board is part of that. I don't support it. There was an issue where the vessel was leaving and you had an opportunity and something that happened here that nobody paid attention to. The warrior spirit was leaving. And do you know, and no one has put that in the public domain for farm reasons, the warrior spirit contract for the 3 years extension with the renewal for 3 years, for 1 year, 1 year, 1 year. When that charter party agreement was signed, the exit clause was excised from that agreement, which made it virtually impossible for the Port Authority to terminate the contract of the warrior spirit for failure for performing the contract. And when the investigation was done, we were told that Miss Ford, she's not here, so I don't want to bash her, all right? Did the contract. Mr. Grant said, well, he thought Miss Ford have been a lawyer. He signed off on it, and when they went to the ministry said, well, they thought that they do due diligence. And as a consequence of that, the port found themselves in a situation where the Express, the Warrior Spirit was limping, one engine, creating all kinds of havoc, and there was no mechanism to get rid of that. And the question that I would like this committee to investigate, why it is that the exit clause to protect Trinidad and Tobago was excised from that charter party agreement that put Trinidad and Tobago in this problem where we had to go outside there because the vessel was on one engine. It was taking as much as 14 to 15 hours to do cargo. The public was complaining, and the then government was forced to acquire a vessel, given the fact that the sea bridge is an essential service. Having said that, I heard a lot of talk, and I will express my view as I see it. I have said it publicly, and that put me, as some people say, for a frontal attack by people high in this country. But that's the life that I live, and the truth will always be the truth. Had the charter party agreement signed, because no maritime industry, and I hear all kind of talk, and I disagree. There isn't nothing in the maritime industry that there's an implied contract. The charter party agreement is what dictates what happened in terms of your service between the charterer and the charter, right? And that's a maritime law. That is a basic, right? The contracts that people normally use is BIMCO, but I don't want to get into that. But what I find strange, right? There was a refusal because somebody said somebody was holding a gun to the head, which we will deal with. But we had a contract for 2 vessels, and the vessel was not in Trinidad and Tobago waters, and a charter party agreement was signed. That is unheard of in the maritime industry. People from the ITF call me and say, but what is wrong with all here in Trinidad and Tobago? How you all could do something like that? That is unheard of, and I would like that to be investigated. How did we see it fit to sign a charter party agreement, which all in a sudden we determine is the correct thing to do, but for a vessel that is not yet in your territorial waters, for a vessel that did not do a sea trial, how that is possible? Okay, having said that, right? Had we signed the charter party agreement, the Galaxia could not leave Trinidad and Tobago because they would have been binded by that agreement. And if they had left, it would have been serious consequences. But more importantly, are you aware that the Galaxia had the capacity to increase the passenger ship by 137 more people? So it means all the seats was on the vessel, you know. And if you wanted that option, you could have done it, like what you did with the vessel that is here, because the vessel left the port as a ro-ro vessel. And you know what is a ro-ro vessel in maritime law? A vessel that could only carry no more than 12 passengers. That's the meaning of a ro-ro vessel. But the vessel became a passenger ferry when it got a provisional license in Panama. So when the vessel had the charter party agreement, it was a ro-ro vessel, and we knew that we didn't want a ro-ro vessel. We knew that we wanted a passenger vessel. And that is a question I will want this committee to investigate, because those are several questions that, to me, as you say, a trade union maritime person that is practiced internationally, that raises red flag in my head. And let me make a final pointer. In my view, this thing was calculated and designed to have this result. Nobody could change my mind. And I will tell you why. I will tell you why. And I will say it now because you say to talk. I and my executive, 13 members, spoke to the Minister Sininon. And I warned them about the consequences of not signing the charter party agreement. And he said, They could go. Nobody holding this government to ransom. It have vessels outside there, and I say, Honorable Minister, we had 6 tenders and all failed. I am telling you, given what is happening in the market outside there, if that vessel leaves Trinidad and Tobago, it's going to be embarrassing to us. And I even make a joke, and I said, listen, if they have the gun at your head, as a negotiator, I do it internationally, I will go and negotiate for you. And I warned them, I have 13 members who are willing to come and sign affidavits to that effect. And no one took on the union. Okay? And I saw the consequences of what happening. And let me raise something again for this August body. And the truckers came to see me. And there's a lady who is in this body. She was in the meeting at the Union Hall. And I told them that 4 months before the Atlantic provider came to Trinidad and Tobago to operate, we knew it was coming here. Before the Express, the Warrior Express left Trinidad and Tobago, we knew that the Atlantic provider was going on work in Trinidad and Tobago territorial waters. And it's coincidental that that same vessel, which is a vessel that this union arrested, the Jet Looters, we arrested. You know why we arrested that vessel? For failure for paying the foreign crew 1, and 2, for unsafe conditions of the vessel. And do you know that within the month, the extra month that that vessel was operating, what the union say came to pass, and luckily it was the last month. You know the vessel breakdown, and the vessel is still outside there waiting to be repaired. So we was operating a vessel that we knew that could not carry passengers. And what was told to us, that by the circumstances demand that that happen. The same thing with the barge. The truckers can tell you, I spoke to them about the barge. They went to the minister, and the minister told them, over telling all of that, talking foolishness, we are not bringing no barge in Trinidad and Tobago. But there was a certain board member, before that board member became a board member, was walking with his computer with that badge in it to operate in Trinidad and Tobago. And do you know when the badge came, they allowed the badge to dock at JSS in a condemned area from the OSH. And this union had to take it up so that the badge could have lived there because it was unsafe. Those are facts. Those are not friction of my imagination. Those are the realities that I am speaking. And all I'm trying to say, Minister Mark and other members, I'm a Trinidadian, you know. And it hurts me to know what has happened there, because I operate in the maritime industry. I'm the regional representative for the ITF for Latin America and the Caribbean region. I travel all over the maritime world, and I know what I'm speaking of. You understand? And then people just ask us, do you print money in Trinidad and Tobago? How could you have a 30-year-old vessel and paying $14,000 US a month for a 30-year-old vessel? And those are the realities. And all I'm simply saying, that this committee has a golden opportunity to put things in place to ensure that this doesn't happen to Trinidad and Tobago again. You cannot allow a vessel to leave your country without having another vessel in place and create a situation where you are forced to take any vessel at any price. That is unheard of in the maritime world and is unfair to the taxpayers. And I want the public to understand that, you know, the money that is being paid is taxpayers' money. And therefore, I have a responsibility as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago to express my views. Some people tell me, well, Annisette, they will take the contract, they will set up people to come at you. But if that is the price for expressing an honest view, so be it.
Mr. Annisette, I want to be clear on something.
Yes, sir.
Because you said to us that you approached the minister and warned of what the consequences, as you were seeing them at the time.
Yeah.
Am I to conclude that you're laying blame for this impasse squarely at the feet of the minister?
Yes, I am. I make no apologies for that. I make none whatsoever until somebody can tell me why the Charter Party agreement wasn't signed, right? Given all the assurances that was given the letter coming from the permanent secretary ministry to the Tobago users of the fast ferry, who said, yes, we're going to sign an agreement. And until I can get any justifiable answer, I have concluded in my mind that your failure, and you know, and what I'm saying is the minister, right? The minister may have said, I was not minister at a particular point in time. I wasn't even in cabinet. That is not the issue. The issue is that the vessel left under your watch, and therefore, if the vessel left under your watch, you should be man enough to take the responsibility for the chaos that the leaving of the Galaxia caused to the people of Tobago in particular. Okay, because I interface with them. They talk to me. The truckers came to me, and the truckers, as a consequence of what happened, joined the National Trade Union Center. They joined, and we had meetings. And I expressed to them long before the barge came, and there's somebody who, from Tobago, who is around, who could confirm that too, that we were going to get the barge and the Atlantic provider to operate the sea bridge, and people doubted me. And it came to pass. You know why? Because the circumstances was such that we were told that we have no other alternative but to hire those two vessels, a barge and a ro-ro vessel that could not carry passengers.
Okay, at the juncture at which you became aware of that, did you seek to speak to any of the other key players, like the port or?
Yes, I did. I expressed that to the port, and there are people who, if they want to be honest, can come and say that Michael Annisette, as the president of Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union, did express that view, and it came to pass.
Did you, at any stage, think that it may be advisable to speak to people further up the chain of command?
Like?
Well, you have the port, specific responsibility for this sea bridge service. No. Then beyond that, you have the ministry. No. There's a permanent secretary there that oversight over the port.
No, but as I...
And I'm going up the chain.
Okay, yeah, okay.
You said you spoke to the minister.
Yeah.
Did you speak to any other public authorities, individuals?
I would have spoken to another minister who I know personally, expressing some concerns. I would have spoken to someone who had the ear of the Honorable Prime Minister. I don't know if that person would have transmitted the sentiments of the Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union. I would have made public statements in the public domain in terms of how the union felt about it. And you know what is strange, Chair? The panorama. This union said, do not sell the panorama, you know. They went and sold it, and the panorama is operating right now. Good. And then do you know that the panorama was one of the vessels that would have put into tender to come back and work in Trinidad and Tobago? But the problem is, who is Michael Annisette, who is from Oxford University, could come and tell us what to do, what he knows? He's a dock man. You understand? He knows nothing. I'm not a professional. I don't have a doctor by my name. So my views are not taken seriously. And I can point to several issues that we would have raised, and it has come to pass. Because Oxford University is not UE. We are not respected. We are dock workers. Who is Annisette? Who is this Annisette to come and have a contract for people? Yes, 700. This African person, this trade union man from behind the bridge. Who is he? I am not part of the so-called economic elite or business elite.
I hear, and I want to give another member a chance.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Annisette.
Yes, my friend.
Just say it again, my friend. Is it 700,000 per vessel per month?
Yes. It's 7. I have the figures here if you want me to recheck it. But I know it is in that capacity. And let me tell you The contract wasn't for the supply of labor only. It was several things that the port was doing. And I want to point out to the public that our contract would have saved the port money because it was costing the Port Authority much more money, all right, to do the same business that we were doing. Do you know that we would have paid more than $13 million to the Port Authority? Yes, well, I want the public to know that because you see, people talk and nobody talks about that. Do you know that the port gets $133,000 per vessel per month? Are you aware of that? And the 133 is more than what is the requirement because the position is that we're supposed to pay on the sales. And we pay more than the sales. The Port Authority has benefited from this contract. Nobody talks about that. Do you know how much money that we would have paid in income tax? You would want to know? Over $15 million. Okay, nobody sit down and talk about it. And then, as I'm telling you, the concept of the union being involved in economic activities was a concept that I embrace, given the statement, what I read, from the founding father of the PNM.
Thank you, Mr. Annisette, for reiterating that piece of information.
Yeah, no, it is critical because it was a philosophy that the founding father of the party enshrined, and it is black and white. And it is a principle that was supported by my lone friend, a good friend of mine, Mr. Khan, when he made his statement to Parliament on Friday, April 29, 2005.
You have entered that in the record already. We wish to move on.
No, I want to repeat it for purpose of the public to understand what is happening. Because they make it appear that Annisette took a gun to somebody.
Thank you, sir.
Annisette.
Member, proceed.
Mr. Annisette, no
Yes,
intent
sir.
to be facetious.
Facetious.
Do you have a magical business formula? Because some of the things that you're saying are mind-boggling.
I want to believe that from where I sit, as I said, I believe in several things, okay? And those things guide me. And when you put faith, all right, in that, everything is going to go right. Okay. Because our spiritual ancestors will guide you. And I walk with you back. Miat, the guiding principles of moral living, an African book. And this is what guides me.
I'm very intrigued by the fact that you raised that reference. Because just like you, I'm a student of history. And I know the history of the trade union movement in this country in terms of bringing dignity and rights to the majority of our people. And we expect that the unions operate with that cultural and historical underpinning. Mr. Annisette, do your workers have contracts?
Yes.
Could you supply us with copies of those contracts?
I will.
Because we have testimony which says otherwise, that they don't have contracts.
Okay. They sign on, and let me explain to the public so the public is going to understand it. When we formed this company, it was a vision of Michael Annisette. And we had a lot of debates within whether a union should be involved in business and then whatnot. And we set up what you call a different approach to how we do business. We did not want to run the business in the traditional way where you have it. And we used to have meetings almost every Tuesday with the workers. We talk about the contracts. We talk about what are the terms. We talk about
so
what
so
is
you have
expected.
contracts.
Yes.
They have contracts.
Yes.
And you can supply this committee with copies or templates of that contract.
What they would have signed to. Yeah. Okay. No problem.
Okay. Thank you. Anyway, I'll defer.
Good afternoon again.
Yeah. Pleasant day to you.
I've been listening intently, and I just wanted to get some clarification. As much as I've heard all that you've said regarding the issue with the ferries and the service, the inter-island transport service, I'm looking at the one thing that I know that is under your control, or the control of the union, and gauging the operations of that would gauge other things. So you have the Port Workers and Private Sector Manning Limited. That's the company that is responsible for the 703,000 per vessel contracts. And you indicated earlier that the business place is where? At SWWTU?
Yeah. One the Rising Road.
Okay. How is that company structured?
Meaning?
In the sense that, who is the CEO of that company? Who is the manager of that company?
We have a CEO, and the CEO of that company is a former member of the People's National Movement, which was Joseph Ross. We had Ferdy Ferreira at one time, who was the CEO. We had Mr. Alphonse at one time, who was the CEO. Presently, Mr. Joseph Ross, a former member of Parliament, right, is the CEO of that company.
CEO of that company. Okay, and the question I'm asking, because you said that the purpose of the company was set up because you would have had, I guess, union members or workers being retrenched, and so it would have provided an opportunity for them to continue working under that arrangement. Yes?
No, no, no. No.
So what was the purpose of the company being set up?
The company, let me explain it again, and I read the document, so I don't want to refer to the document, where there was a philosophical discussion with the then government in terms of outsourcing and privatizing the port. And this union made its position clear that we are not going to accept, under any circumstances, any government go in and retrench our workers and bringing in people from outside to do the very work that they retrench our members for. And therefore, we were saying, if you have to outsource, you have to do it through our company, and we set up a company in that regard. And it didn't even speak to maritime. It speak to the question of when the government took the decision to set up 3 separate companies, and the decision was to outsource it and to privatize it. Okay, so I want you to understand that. In terms of the maritime operations, we were given a labor supply for one specific period, meaning that the port did not have sufficient people to man the vessel when the fast ferry came to Trinidad and Tobago, and therefore the Port Authority and the government at the day agreed that the Trinidad and Tobago Seamen's Union, being an international and regional labor supply company for maritime workers, they will source the labor through our organization, and we supply the Port Authority with the labor only. It is in 2010 when the Port Authority determined that they were losing money, that they weren't happy with the operation, it was inefficient, that they determined that they were going on for public tender for the whole operations of the vessel. And it's at that point our company tendered with the figures and won the tender.
Okay.
Just let me just interject here. What was the length of that contract?
The contract, which
the 2010 contract?
The 2010 contract was for 3 years in the first instance.
Mm-hmm. So your company is still engaged. So by what process were you engaged after 2013?
After, when the contract had finished, the board determined, not Michael Annisette, that they will renew the contract for another 3 years.
So they tendered a contract for 3 years?
Yeah.
Because they wanted to go to public tender.
What's that?
I say the board at the time in 2010 decided that they want to go out for public tender.
Yeah.
They
went out for they didn't decide it. They went out
for public tender.
Yeah.
You won the contract legitimately, fine. The contract was awarded for 3 years.
Yeah.
So on what basis didn't they not go back out for tender and they just keep rolling over the contract?
No. You see, keep rolling over. It's only one rollover.
From 2013 to 2016.
Yeah, it's 3 years.
All right.
All right. Okay, but
what was the rationale for that?
Having said that, I will ask you a question. What is the rationale for NEC giving Caribbean Crewing a contract, right, for more than 12 years, and they went off for tender once? What is the rationale of giving the contract for the supply of transport for prisoners? How many times did that contract went out for tender? You see, You see, my concern is, and I will say it openly, I want to believe that it have different rules for different people. When you're in Doxford, people intend to inject into the public mind that something fishy went on there because it rolled over. But I tendered for the NEC, and I'm going to show you too. I tendered for the NEC. Okay, and you know what happened? When there was a change of government, the NEC, which is Caribbean Crewing, got a rollover too. But nobody talks about that.
No, Mr. Annisette, the issue is not just you. No, hold on. We interrogated the port management and the port board for the very fact of the same rollover process for Bay Ferries. And we took objection to it. So you know, we are just trying to be consistent. Because
that is about consistency?
The whole issue of, there has been a proliferation of rolling over in the port, which was brought to the attention of this committee, and we didn't see that in a favorable light, and we continue to so do, and that will be reflected in our report.
Okay, rollover, as you know, is not nothing new in Trinidad and Tobago, because I could call several government contracts where there are rollovers, and I've called 2 so far. I ask you, and I will ask this committee, tell me how many times the transport for prisoners, which is millions of dollars, contract went out for tender. Wasn't there a rollover? The NEC contract, wasn't there rollovers in that contract too? So
thank you, Mr. Annisette. Your point has been made.
Okay, all right.
Your point has been made. But we have some other questions to get into.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add quickly. I think the issue here that in terms of the rollover, is that you're part of a union that represents workers and the very entity that is issuing these contracts.
Issuing what contract?
The contract, the Port Workers Private Sector Manning Limited, that company and the contract that it holds. And therefore, if it continues to roll over, it could easily be said that based on the union and the ability of the union to, let's say, strike, that you can force that contract to roll over. And this is why it would be better to have it tendered at every particular point. So that if you tender and you win the contract, then it's fair in that regard.
No, but
having it roll over, and you're using the example of the transport of prisoners. The people transporting the prisoners aren't the people holding the prisoners in place. And therefore, they cannot use the fact that they are working for the prisons to get the contract to transport them. And there's a separation there. And I think that is the issue that is happening here.
I beg to disagree with you, and I will tell you why, sir. You see, we form a company. It is registered. We went out for tender. We won the tender, want to repeat it. We did nothing wrong. Michael, and then if your analysis is because they would be frightened, because Annisette could strike. Annisette could strike in the morning. There are so many dilapidated equipment on the port. There are so many issues that if I want to be facetious and if I want to use strong tactics, I can strike in the morning and nobody can do me anything. So to suggest to the public that we could strike is an unfair statement given the state of the port in terms of what is happening. The port do not even have paint to paint the lines for the tractor to run on. They don't even have paint. The port have not paid workers who have been injured. The port have not paid workers who have gone home, going in 2 and 3 years. And I have several reasons that I could sit down without a contract to say, hey, I am going to stop. But you know why we don't do it? I will tell you why. The port strike once against my advice. And the Cartagenian port is as a consequence of the port striking. You know why? In the maritime world, in the sea world, shippers don't bung for Port of Spain. And as a president of a union who travel internationally, I would not do anything that will compromise Trinidad and Tobago to see our people lose jobs on the port. And therefore, there are times I have to turn my back and accept things that is unacceptable in our port industry.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I have a couple very, very short questions, Mr. Annisette. In terms of the model that you have adopted, in terms of the business model, quickly, is that something that is common throughout unions throughout the world?
It is something that is common in in Europe in particular. It is something that is common in the United States, okay? And it is something that I learned when I went to Shanghai.
Okay, thank you. So I get that it's a common model for unions. Yes. That's what I wanted to get at. Yeah. Is the SWWTU the only union in Trinidad and Tobago that has adopted that model, or have any other of the main unions adopted that model as well? All right.
Before we formed our company, there was a company that was formed. My learned friend, Mr. Waymark, can assist. NUJFW and SWWTU Construction Company. That was formed long before we formed our company. And we were charged with the responsibility of building affordable houses for our members and people who are not our members. Okay.
So I know you mentioned that already before, so I know that's on the record. Because what I'm trying to get at, one, is that the model is a common model throughout unions, throughout the world, so it's nothing new for Trinidad and Tobago. Two, as it exists today, besides the SWTU, any of the other unions have adopted that model that is working?
The only other union that have attempted to adopt it is the Steel Workers Union, okay, and they had some issues, and as I speak to you, the Siemens Union in St. Lucia would have called me for assistance in terms of setting up the model, because unions within the Caribbean are now beginning to understand that just like how the world is changing, that the trade union movement have to change with the time, else not we will end up like the dinosaur.
Okay, so you have the only active model.
Yeah.
Now, would you agree that that model, because the union can generate revenue, that I am assuming should be used towards the greater welfare of its members, vis-a-vis training, assistance with medical, and so on. Does that position give you the ability not to depend on the state for handouts?
That was the whole concept. That was the whole underpinning ideology of going into your own business so that you could service your members in several different ways. As I speak to you, sir, even in the National Trade Union Center, we have now set up what we call a committee to look into the National Trade Union Center going into business, modeling the Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union model as I speak to you.
Okay, and I want to run through some very, very quick ones, just quickly. The business component of the SWWTU, does that business comply with all the state regulations in terms of taxes, NIS, BIR, VAT?
Every living one, and I have all the certificates here. Every living. It's not a fly-by-night company. It's a company that has been formed, has been registered, and has followed all the rules, and we pay taxes. Right? We don't avoid taxes, even though if the government haven't paid us for 8 months and 9 months, all right, we still pay our taxes.
And you are in a position that if you were to be checked and verified for clearances in the morning, all your fiduciary requirements would have been met.
In the morning.
Last two questions, Mr. Annisette. You spoke considerably about the Galicia, and I trust that you have good knowledge of it, because during the term of this inquiry, I have gotten conflicting reports on certain aspects of the Galicia. To the best of your knowledge, when, if you could remember, when was the first working day of the Galicia? Because there has been,
the Galicia, I know, because when the vessel came, it was the 7th, don't hold me to the time, I think it was somewhere around the 7th of July, thereabout.
7th of July.
Right, okay. I was on board the vessel because as a Trinidadian and as the president of the SWWTU, I wanted to see what was happening, and I was on board, and they had issues with docking up, and I had some discussions with the captain.
Because
No.
why I ask that?
No,
Because
no,
there
all
has
right.
been-
I just want to make the point of following you. But like every other vessel, when a vessel comes to Trinidad and Tobago, it doesn't work immediately. There are certain requirements, legal requirements that you must go through. Drugger's license. The Maritime Division must come on board, do surveys, and give you the safe manning levels. Check to see whether the vessel meet all the maritime IMO SOLAS requirements before you can sail. And I know that the vessel would have sailed about a week or two after. It cannot be more than 2 weeks after.
The reason why I asked
waiting for those certifications.
the permanent secretary, via testimony, agreed with Senator Khan when he proffered that the vessel sat, and the first working day of the vessel was August 4th. And I wanted to get some clarity for the record that it was not in fact August 4th.
It wasn't August 4th. I can certainly say that, but don't hold me to the specific date, but what I can tell you is very easy to find out, because I heard my learned friend said that he got August 4th from his research. But if he was doing the research, all he would have had to do was to go and see the sailing schedule of the vessel, and when the vessel went to Tobago, and when Mr. London welcomed the vessel and praised the vessel. It wasn't August the 4th.
Last question, Mr. Annisette.
Unfortunately, Mr. Khan, somebody may have given you misinformation.
Last question. The Honorable Prime Minister, in speaking on this matter at public functions, and probably recorded, I think it's recorded in the minutes of the testimonies of some others, that the Galicia spent 7 months idle in Trinidad, costing taxpayers money. Can you verify if you are aware that this vessel docked somewhere for 7 months, costing taxpayers money?
When the Honorable Prime Minister made that statement, if you check the records, I would have stated several things. That somebody is misleading the Honorable Prime Minister, because that statement is so patently incorrect. It is so misleading that I do not believe that if the Prime Minister had the relevant information, he would have made such a statement. And there were several other statements that the Prime Minister would have made, and I said it in the public 3 times, that it's unfortunate that people are misleading the Prime Minister, because one of the statements was that the dredging was for the Galicia alone, and it would have cost taxpayers $50 million every 2 years for the Galicia if we had to put it up by JSS, which again was a misleading statement. It was an unfortunate statement, and they were being unkind to the Prime Minister.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Annisette.
Yeah, Mr. Annisette, you made a very startling revelation earlier when you said that you knew 4 months before the Atlantic provider arrived in this country that it was coming.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, firstly, whether the tender process that finally threw up the Atlantic provider, how would you describe that tender process, having regard to the fact that 4 months before you knew that that vessel was coming to Trinidad or going to be used on the sea bridge? That's the first question. And the second short question I have for you. We were told in evidence by one Mr. Adrian Bihari, Deputy Chairman of the Port Authority, that he negotiated, I have it here in writing, both the contracts for both the Trinity Transporter, which he brought down from 12,000 US per day to 8,000 US per day. And he also negotiated the contract for the Atlantic provider, which was 14,500 per day. And he was able to get it at 14,000 per day. I just want to ask you, as a former commissioner on the board, how can a single member negotiate on behalf of the port, or do you have a process that is employed under the Port Authority Act, as well as the manual, which is entitled
The State Manual.
State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual? Those are the two areas I would like to have clarified.
Okay, you are so correct. And then let us deal with, because I heard the statement and I was shocked and I was surprised that nobody from this honorable committee pursued that line of questioning. It is unheard of in the corporate world, and more so given the state manual, the state performance manual, that a board member is seen to be intimately involved in a negotiating process for and on behalf of the Port Authority. The board is policy decision and have oversight, and therefore all negotiations that went on since I was there, since I was on the port, and I could tell you about all, no board members was ever intimately involved in the process. And therefore, it raises serious questions. And I raise a point that I knew that the badge, even before the young man became a board member, it was in his computer. And it's rather coincidental that that vessel came. And I would like to ask, who was the owner of that badge? One, and what is the relationship he may have with the negotiator of the contract? I will want to ask that publicly. Who is the owner of the badge? And if there's any relationship with the person who had the badge in his contract and in his computers. And Mr. Chair, I don't know if you'll permit me, because I think this is important. This is the National Trade Union budget brief that we send every year to the government when they ask for our comments. And in this very, and this is NATUC, and NATUC has articulated, I don't know if you want a copy, I could give you a copy about the union involvement in the economic activities of Trinidad and Tobago as a philosophy and a principle of the National Trade Union Center.
So you could submit it to us.
Okay, I will.
Your second question was answered. Member Mark?
While he's looking for it, Chairman,
Which one it is?
I asked you about the tendering process.
Yeah. Yeah, all right. I answered that because I was told, because you see, the maritime world is a very small world. And I represent, as I say, the Caribbean and Latin American region. And therefore, almost every year, I attend an international shipping conference that involves the ITF internationally and the International Shipping Association. And they know everything that happens in the maritime. And they brought it to my attention. And I tell them, now, man, that is just old talk.
One more, Chairman.
Mr. Annisette,
Yeah.
would you like to make any closing comments?
Yeah. I will.
Do so now.
All right. I would like to thank this honorable committee for giving me the opportunity to unequivocally put on the records where we are as an organization, why we do what we do, and we are not only involved in maritime, we're involved in construction too, and other work, and we employ over 500 people. Having said that, the issue of this contract was a big, big hoorah when the People Partnership government came, and there was an express report again, and he said again, corruption, whatnot. But the People's Partnership government, like the founding father, when they sat down with the union and they understand our philosophy, supported the concept of the union's involvement in business, like the People's National Movement did in the past. Okay? So I want to assure you and this committee that this union is committed and has always been committed to working with the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago and PLDECO to ensure that we become efficient and productive. We'll work with the board, the management, and any government that is in power, because the port, as you know, is the lifeline, economic, and the heartbeat of any country. And if there are inefficiencies, if there are a lot of unproductive and waste, we, the customer, we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, suffer. And it's in that context we will continue to work with the government, any government that is in power, the board and management, to ensure that we have an effective port. And I want to reiterate it. This union makes no apologies whatsoever to anybody for venturing into a new dynamic, into a new fundamental principle, into a new vision, into a new area in terms of how we generate revenues, how we participate in the economic activities of the country, and how we will do things to not to be dependent on the government. So we'll be independent. And we see that model through, as I say, the book and several other countries which we have adopted. Some people disagree with it and they're entitled to it, but we have been able to generate employment for over 500 people in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Annisette. This hearing is suspended and will resume at 5 o'clock.